ladies and gentlemen. So I've been asked to talk about GPS and precision farming from a grower's perspective and how it fits in with sugar beet, and that includes what we're doing at home. Today's papers have been set out in a building way, in that we're building a story of how to grow sugar beet, and there will be some reoccurring themes and subjects that you'll notice through the papers. Sugar beet, the yields that we're growing at home, and you as sugar beet growers will know that they've been increasing over the years, but they've been done really with us as growers treating the crop with a broad brush and not necessarily treating it intelligently and using the active ingredients, and Don mentioned the reduced number of active substances that we have in our armory now going forward, and we need to be more intelligent about how we do things. So, a quote from Robert Law from the Farmers Weekly a couple of years ago now: GPS is not an extra anymore, it's a must. I and my colleagues in RTK Farming agree with that. I've recently been fortunate enough to hear two speakers that have come over to the UK and spoke about how they farm in the States, not necessarily growing sugar beet, but growing a maize crop, which is a row crop, precision planted, so some similarities. And they say now that GPS steering is not an extra, as Robert said. It's like a microwave at home. It's the standard thing that all farmers have. So the use of guidance and precision farming in row crops. What we do now, I'll be talking about a little bit about how we see the future looks, and a little bit about RTK farming ourselves and what we do. So what we do now, we're all quite good at this now. A lot of farms have got GPS steering on tractors, and certainly in my area, I would say that more than half of the arable land is controlled in some way via GPS, and we can grow the crop neatly and make it look very smart. But the problem is we haven't necessarily taken the next step. So we need to use the GPS guidance systems to improve the efficiency in agriculture. So it's not just about straight lines. And how we do that, the tractors now will be equipped with aerials on the roof to receive GPS signals. They use the satellites that are floating around up there, and also a signal from a fixed base station to work out the location. And in the cabs, there are quite expensive, quite sophisticated screens and computers that are doing the steering for us. But these screens and computers are capable of doing much more than what most farmers, I believe, are using them for. It's quite a big investment, and what we need to be doing through training and education is making sure that individual farms and drivers get the most of what that technology can do for them in the efficiency as to how they run their farm. So there are many more uses for guidance. Controlled traffic wheelings, the benefits from compaction. Many of you will remember last year in particular, the seed beds were very delicate. We had a dry crust on top, but they were very wet inside, and some form of controlled traffic wheelings, so we're not driving where we're going to be growing sugar beet, was very important to be able to use. Variable rate fertilizer application, again, it brings economy to growing the crop and savings, and means that we're making best use of a limited resource. Variable seed rate for yield improvement. I'll talk about that a little bit later when we get talking about drills. Auto shut-off of spray, environmental benefits, which we're all keen to show that we use best practice, and also brings economies to the business. Geo-seeding, which is a sort of a tagline that we're starting to hear more and more now as sugar beet drills get more sophisticated. Also helps with reducing overlapping, overseeding, and brings economies to the business as well as helping environmentally. And implements guidance as well, bringing accuracy to what we do. And finally, row crop working, spraying. And we all know blackgrass is the major topic of any farming conversation. We always used to regard, certainly at home, sugar beet as the cleaning crop. with the resistance that blackgrass has now, sugar beet isn't the cleaning crop anymore, and by using GPS for row crop working, whether it's accurate inter-row hoeing or band spraying, brings some big advantages in controlling this problem. So goals and achievements, reducing the growing costs and increasing yield. As I said earlier, we're all good at broad brush, but we need to profit through efficiency. And as we know that the prices of what we're selling have become more volatile over the years, and this year and next year, we all know with sugar beet, there's a big difference. If we can grow that crop next year as efficiently as possible, that's where we're going to get some profit. Also about reduced carbon footprint. I am involved in a wheat development group on a supply chain of milling wheat, so I understand the importance of this. I know Waitrose are speaking this afternoon. And so both our consumers, our customers, are more and more interested in the carbon footprint of what we're doing. And by using GPS on the farm, we're using best possible practice, making as many savings as possible, and this keeps the carbon footprint down. We're reducing pesticide use, which obviously is something that we're all interested in doing. Better timeliness, kinder to the environment, and soil life. And there's a theme again this afternoon we'll hear about cover cropping and how farmers have started more recently treating and thinking about the soil in a different way with reduced tillage and cover cropping. And if we can look after our soil, it's going to benefit us. And finally, competitiveness. We grow sugar beet in the UK. We've got European competitors. We need to be as efficient as possible and think about sustainability. So controlled traffic wheelings, I mentioned earlier, we're not controlled traffic farming, but our sugar beet drill is 6 meters, our cultivator is 6 meters, we apply Avadex at 12 meters, and we spray at 24 meters. So there's no reason, without me spending any money, not to get involved in making sure that where the tractors are running, we're not going to be planting sugar beet. And when this picture was taken, it was clearly very dry, and perhaps that season it wasn't as important, but last year with those delicate seed beds, it was very important. We're involved in nutrition and soil texture maps, and farmers, I mean, I've done 40 harvests, we all know our land, we know where the dry bits are, where the wet bits are, where the heavy land, the light land is. But once you've got a soil texture map available in your screen to then start doing intelligent things with, the machine can take over and accurately change the seed rate, change the fertilizer rates, and do the clever things it needs to do. So that's one of the first steps to getting the efficiencies from precision farming. Variable rate application, and that's just a picture of my screen going across a field, and there may only be 3 zones on that field. Some fields there may be 5, but it means that we're putting the right amount in the right place automatically. Auto section control on the sprayer, also very important. It's one of the last things that I did at home, and then afterwards you think, well, why didn't I do that earlier? Because you will see from here, from the overlaps, and this is 10 sections in 24 meters, so I mean, you know, a long way away from controlling every nozzle, we're keeping the overlap right down to a minimum. And so my fields at home now, when I spray them, they will regularly record as 0.01 or 0.02 of the area that I recorded last time I sprayed it. So the efficiencies that brings is enormous. I've got one friend who's farming a larger area than me. He's 2,500 hectares, I think he is, and he's saying that now, since the adoption of GPS on his farm, putting his tram lines accurately where they should be, and using auto switching on the sprayer, he's spraying 100 hectares less in a season. Every time he sprays his farm, effectively it's 100 hectares less than it used to be. And so there are huge savings to be made once you've adopted this technology. And by not using the auto bit and just going back to switching manually like we used to, or I certainly used to, and then looking at the screen and seeing the amount of overlap that I've done on a job by doing it manually instead of automatically really highlights the efficiencies that this brings. And also, just interestingly, this field there would have been an insecticide in that mix, and there's a leaf wrap there. Band spraying, I mentioned band spraying earlier for total control of blackgrass. This is Ed Banks, a fellow RTK Farming guy, and he's now using band spraying on his sugar beet crop for total control of blackgrass. I think he's able to apply 2 chemicals simultaneously. The front tank is made up of 2 different sections, and whilst that's quite expensive machinery to have on the farm, when you think you can use it in oilseed rape, sugar beet and potentially beans as well, and spread that investment across the farm and do a 100% job on blackgrass, then it's probably money well spent. And I think there's, out the back here, there's some machines that are capable of doing that. Just a few examples, and certainly down here you can see the difference that something like that can do, and I think this one is inter-row hoeing and band spraying at the same time. A strip till, that's another thing that I've got involved in. We experimented with last year. I was lucky enough to borrow a strip till machine from a friend at NIAB, and left some stubble over winter, and tried some strip till sugar beet drilling. It's quite an interesting way of saving some money on cultivations and also being able to grow sugar beet on land that perhaps you ordinarily wouldn't grow sugar beet on. Again, this machine I think is out the back being exhibited, a little bit more sophisticated than the one I used, but there are several machines on the market now able to do this, and I think it's an interesting aspect of growing sugar beet. We're not used to seeing this sort of thing on a sugar beet field because traditionally it's clean and brown, but we got good establishment. The crop really looked quite well, and it yielded well, and I was really pleased with how that trial went. And so that's something worth looking at. And there are several advantages, as I've said. I mean, it's about reducing the energy that has gone into producing the crop in establishment, strategic placement of nutrition, and therefore on that machine we could target the nutrition, starter fertilizer under the depth where we were planting the sugar beet, and therefore getting the best from how much we were spending on it. Improved blackgrass control, because that stubble was glyphosated off before it was strip tilled, so the crop grew really clean through the season. I didn't have blackgrass to worry about. Weed beet control, it's another thing that's restricting, and certainly as a contractor I see it on some of the customers' farms that weed beet has started to prevent them growing sugar beet now, and by the use of strip till and not disturbing and encouraging weed beet to grow, it's a way of getting on top of that problem. It's about moisture conservation, in that you haven't tilled the whole soil profile, and also about the holding capacity of machinery in the wet. And I see strip till and the strip cereal drilling and cover crops and no-till drilling as being more and more popular, and there's more interest in it now. But I think by growing, and people say, well, with no-till, how can you grow sugar beet in that rotation? I think by the use of the strip till technique within a no-till or reduced till rotation is a way of not putting the damage back in the soil that you would had you have ploughed it and made it all soft, and then tried to lift sugar beet in a wet autumn. And of course on fen soils, rather than having to establish a barley cover crop to hold the soil together. We've all seen these soils, if you're anywhere near the fens on a windy March day, disappear. Of course it deals with that problem. And the other thing that I was interested in looking at this year, but I didn't get round to, is overwinter green cover crop and then strip tilling either into it or between the rows and establishing sugar beet and getting the benefit of a cover crop in that situation. So what the future looks like, well, it's a difficult thing to predict quite what we'll be doing in the future, but geoseeding and having drills that are much more technical will be part of that. I mean, just to concentrate on sugar beet drills for a moment, we were the same, and I'm sure many people in the room here will regard the sugar beet drill as the family heirloom, and it's in the corner of the shed, and we've had it since anybody can remember, and it drills the sugar beet, it does the job, there's no need to change it. Well, the year we changed our sugar beet drills, probably 4 seasons ago, really demonstrated how, without the geoseeding and all the techie bits, how the design of the shares and mechanically how much improvement there has been in design of sugar beet drills over the years. And the establishment and the percentage of establishment we got in all conditions was vastly better than we had before. And you think, yes, I know it was expensive, but I should have done this sooner. So, you know, there comes a time when you have to kick the family heirloom out and actually spend some money, because you will see a lot of benefits. And sugar beet drills have got larger, and we're talking about economy and not wanting to overlap and not wanting to waste expensive seed. And through the use of precision farming and the screens that we've got in the tractor cabs now, this is the sort of effect you can have. And this happens to be maize. I couldn't find a picture that demonstrated this with sugar beet, but when every unit can switch off at the right place as it approaches the headland, there are a lot of benefits in that. You don't have to tractor hoe out the over drills, and there's a big seed saving as well. Some of the other things we're talking about and thinking about are a runoff, heavy rain events where you get runoff leaching of herbicides and nutrition off the field, and the use of some of the technology that's available on the drills out the back here means that not only can you vary the seed rate on different rows as you go across the field, that you can plant the seed in different patterns to help stop the water and the runoff and pollution on slopes. Other things looking forward to the future, inputs controlled by image. I think drones with a camera hung under them were the most popular Christmas present for farmers last year, where you can buy something now that's quite cheap and fly and look over your own crops. But there are lots of other ways of getting images of your fields that you can then start to use some intelligent application technology on. And it could be cameras on the spray booms, it can be from a drone, or it can be satellite imagery that we can all purchase. So what does that do for us? I'm sure as we go forward in the future, the images will become much better. There'll be more detail. Depending on what lens you put on the camera or what camera you hang on the drone, you'll be able to get different pictures. But this is one. I think this is a field in the States. And if you're thinking about precision application of herbicides to control grass weeds, for instance, it's clear that the whole field doesn't need spraying necessarily. There are areas that do need spraying, and I think this is an old fence line across the middle of the field where clearly the grass weed seed burden was much greater. And with the use of intelligent technology in your sprayer, we'll be able to target where we're spraying quite easily and automatically, rather than blanket treat that whole field. Another image here, another NDVI picture. This, for instance, might be useful for varying fungicide rate or varying nutrition, nitrogen application or whatever. And if these areas of the field here is the very high nutrition area of the field, and this is the light land where it's not as good, you would use a map like this, for instance, to vary nutrition or vary fungicides in rates, etc. This was shown on Top Gear at the weekend, so I know my talk and my slides are really up to date. It does exist because we saw it mowing a lawn, but autonomous tractors of any size and scale in the future, we've actually got the technology now for tractors to operate themselves without somebody sitting in them. Health and safety will take a reserved view of whether they should be released into the wild yet or not. But as I said, they can come in various sizes, and I don't see there's any reason why something like that in the future, wombling up and down individual sugar beet rows, putting a micro dot, squirting a micro dot of herbicide on a weed in front of it, and then going on and searching for the next one, why that shouldn't be possible. Potentially it will come in horticulture first, but this sort of thing can easily happen in the future. There's another example here of something slightly larger in a vineyard environment, and there are larger larger tractors available, and also talking to or listening to one of the guys that came over from the States and did a presentation recently. They're saying now that they have autonomous tractors that at harvest time will drive to the combine, up the controlled wheelings in the right place, which is difficult to get a student to do. They'll speed match the combine while he unloads, and then it will go off to, without spilling any, by the way, and then it will go off to the end of the field where the lorries might be waiting, or the sugar beet clamp might be, automatically to tip the load. And that technology is available today, and you know, it's likely to come in the future. Harvesting. Talking about precision farming and yield maps and NDVI maps, and there's lots of data that we all record now with the screens in the cabs as we go across the field, with or without cameras, that we can analyse and use to be more intelligent about what we apply to the crops and how efficiently we grow them. As of yet, I'm not aware that yield mapping is available on a sugar beet harvester, and because of the nature of the conditions it's working in and the crop it's dealing with, clearly that's more difficult than with a combine harvester with cereals, for instance. But that is the next step that I think we need, so that some of the other techniques that we're using, we can find out what we've done and whether we've made a difference. So I'm looking forward to that technology coming along, and I think there'll be a lot of benefits for us as growers. The other thing, just going back to the strip till and making growing sugar beet in conditions where we haven't moved the whole soil profile 10 inches deep and softened it so that harvesters can then come along in wet conditions and damage it again. There's still a problem with the weight of these harvesters, and they're fantastic, sophisticated things, but we do need to consider what we're doing and the damage we're doing to the soil. But of course, going back to the lightweight option is something none of us really want to go back to. So I think we're stuck where we are for the minute. So just a little bit to finish off on RTK Farming, who we are, where we are, and what happened. This photograph was taken with a group of us. There aren't quite that many of us in the organisation now, but this was a launch photograph that we did in July 2010, really to demonstrate the range of equipment that the Trimble system that we were using can be fitted on. We were EDA funded. We got together as a group wanting to share a signal across Cambridge originally. Then we discovered that NIAB and Trumping Farm Company at the time were also sharing a signal, and so we thought it would be a good idea to get together with them to do our little local Cambridge network. And in the meantime, somebody went to an NFU meeting and heard Chris Knox speak, and we realised that EDA, now DEFRA, at that time, were looking to roll out a precision farming signal across East Anglia, to enable all the farmers in East Anglia to benefit from the advantages of precision farming. That would have taken, it would have been a £1.2 million project, I think, from memory, and it would have taken match funding from 600 farmers. And it was going to be a very difficult ask to get 600 farmers together to do something like that on that scale. And they saw by grant funding us as RTK Farming in a small pilot project, we would perhaps be able to roll it out across East Anglia, which is what we've done. And as I say, they were interested in investing in sustainable farming techniques across the region. So we got grant funding, and we decided at the time that there are all sorts of different degrees of accuracy that you can run your GPS equipment on, going from the free one, which your sat-nav in the car would be using, up through various stages to RTK, which is absolutely the most accurate one. And we thought, actually, well, we'll cut out the middlemen. We're all going to be on this eventually. That's what we'll do. So RTK, what is it? Real-time kinematic. Kinematic is what it stands for. It's a satellite correction signal from a fixed base station, which we see as important. There are other ways of getting an RTK correction signal out there. Some of them involve using the mobile phone signal, which we know has become less reliable. We're repeatable 20 mil accuracy year on year. with no satellite drift. So where my tram lines are this year, they will be next year, they were last year, and they will be the year after. And so whilst we're not necessarily controlled traffic farming on the whole farm, we're controlled tramline farming, and those tram lines are always in the same place. And now we're GLONASS enabled as well, and by unlocking our network to receive the GLONASS satellites, it means that there's a bigger range of satellites out there. The system needs between 4 and 5 satellites to be able to operate, and now there's a bigger choice, so it makes it more reliable. So that's where we started. That was the NIAB base station and the TFC repeater, which we linked onto. That's what we had a business plan and some grant funding from DEFRA to do, which surrounded Cambridge and gave us all the benefit of farming where we wanted to, while still having our signal. And that's where we are now. In fact, even now that's a little bit out of date, because we're working with some guys, some big landowners and estates up in Lincolnshire, and as well as a few base stations in here. We're extending up through Lincolnshire, and effectively in the very near future, you can say we'll be south of the Humber down to London, M1, East Coast. And so any of our subscribers that purchase their signal from us can effectively take their tractors and farm anywhere within the network area. So fantastic for sugar beet. So for contractors, contractors spreading fertilizer when they turn up to the farm and the farmer says, I want you to travel on my tram lines, because that's where they all are, they can now do that. And just a brief thing about cost of membership. Initially £200 a year to join the organisation. We're £500 per machine per year, which is held for the 4th year. We run 1st of January, and there are other ways that you can get a little bit of discount on your signal by going through the buyer groups or Syngenta. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. Questions for David, please? One here.
Mr. White, if you bought your new sugar beet drill today, would you consider reducing its row width?
Reducing its what?
Row width.
Back to 18 from 20?
No, reduce it.
Oh, reducing from 12 to 6?
Whatever you like.
Well, I'm contracting and therefore doing a larger area than at home. So personally, I wouldn't. But certainly, from the old technology that the family thing that's been in the shed for 30 years that had an effective operating speed of 2 miles an hour, and now with the new drills operating at 6 or 8 miles an hour, there's certainly a case for having a narrower drill doing more for you.
Sorry, you haven't quite got the question. The idea, why don't we grow sugar beet on narrower rows than we do at the present then?
It's all about plant population, isn't it? An effective plant population. We're growing on 50 centimetre rows still, but certainly over the last few years, I've decreased the distance between the sugar beet plants from we were planting at 190 millimetres, we're now down at 160 mil distance apart, and we've noticed a sizable yield increase.
Any other questions for David, please?
David, this is Arvind Chidasama, International Sugar Journal. If I can ask you two brief, mutually exclusive questions. First of all, how long did it take you to learn the GPS technology at your farm? And secondly, with sort of many farmers past the age of 60 and slowly losing their visual acuity, would you agree that GPS technology is an added bonus?
Well, to answer the first one, I'm still learning, and these screens are capable of doing lots of things. So initially, like everybody else, we did A-B lines and started driving in a straight line. It's a learning process. We get involved as RTK Farming with AS Communications. They do their annual training days. We get involved in doing talks to the dealer network, and we get involved in training days, and we've got one coming up in a couple of weeks' time for our subscribers, and we see that as a very important, it's about support, customer support and training, a very important aspect of making this technology work for you. And it is not necessarily easy and not something that everybody will pick up, but it's not an age thing either. And Ed Banks will say to you that he'd got a guy on his farm that was 60, 65, and he thought actually he would never adopt it, and he was one of the first guys to realize it made his life very much easier, and he picked it up and ran with it. So it's all about training and support, and every individual is very different.
Thank you. One final question for David.
Thank you. Following on from that last statement, could I just bring a point forward that isn't this something that the agricultural colleges should take more interest in and bring the students along, to bring them along in the future and understand RTK and what precision farming is all about?
Yeah, it certainly is, and I know for a fact, and AS Communications and Trimble and some of the other people dealing with auto steer equipment are having an involvement at Harper Adams, and they have spent quite a lot of money on a department that deals with precision farming and this kind of thing. So perhaps it's been lacking. I mean, the vegetable growers were early adopters of this technology and have been doing it for years, and I think perhaps agricultural colleges and universities were a bit slow picking it up, but certainly they have picked up on it now and are starting to do something constructive.